to close down here in Los Angeles our restaurants and bars, our nightclubs and movie theaters, and these necessary steps that saved lives and everything that you have done have helped us arrive at a point where last week and this week we could finally at last take some steps forward in both controlling the spread of COVID-19 and also seeing our Los Angeles open it up just a little bit more, to see more people able to earn a living, to see more people able to see this beautiful city, from the beaches to the trails, from curbside and doorside pickup to manufacturing. We now see a Los Angeles that can meet this challenge while also staying safe. Thank you for the work that you did to not just bend a curve, but to save lives, and the collective work we are doing to safeguard and restore people's livelihoods. That's what this is all about and has been since the beginning. You made tough sacrifices to lower the infection rate, and it's working. You acted not just to protect yourselves and your loved ones, but your neighbors, and even more profoundly, strangers who you will never meet, but who today are alive because you did the right thing. It's that spirit that's going to carry us through these next weeks and months. We can take these gradual steps forward because of the success that we have collectively earned in caring for each other. Beaches are now open to active recreation, swimming and surfing, running and walking. You still can't sunbathe or gather together, but finally the coast is back. All retail locations are now open for curbside and doorside pickup. This is your chance to shop local. And I want to reiterate, please call a local store, go online if you can buy online, and do what you can to make sure we all support local jobs, local businesses, and our future. Golf courses and trails, except Runyon Canyon in Los Angeles, are now open, as are tennis and pickleball courts, archery ranges, equestrian centers, model airplane areas, and community gardens as well. Getting out in this beautiful weather and safely doing things reminds us that there are still better days ahead, and these days are better than just days before. The Safer at Home order does not end today. As I've tried to say, this is just something the entire world and all of us will have. Public health direction until there is a cure or herd immunity. Something that we will need to continue to have the discipline to live by, because with that discipline will come greater freedoms for all of us. It's not a decision the government makes by itself. This is one we collectively make each day. We can't enforce these from City Hall. They are enforced every single moment when we make the right decision, do the right thing, and help each one of us. And as I've said, this is a process, one in which we look at the numbers, we assess the risk, we look at the need, and we try to implement whatever safety we can do to ensure that all of us can get through this together. It starts with wearing a face covering. It starts with physical distancing. As you know, with face coverings, we previously said we didn't want to just give lip service to protecting those whom we love and care about, who are on the front lines. We wanted to make sure that we are doing something to protect their lives at essential businesses. So now we're asking all Angelenos to have your face covering whenever you leave the house. And whenever you come into contact with people, make sure it is on. You don't need to wear a face covering if you're in a car by yourself. That gets asked a lot. If you're just walking out to get the paper or check the mail down the driveway. But otherwise, wear a face covering, and they will make an enormous difference. This face covering is one part of a system that keeps us all safe. That includes staying safer at home. I know we can start to slip and forget to wash our hands, or maybe physically distance at less than 6 feet. Make sure that you do that and take advantage of the free testing that we have as well. And soon we're adding expanded contact tracing and symptom screening as well. Doing one of these things helps. Doing all of them by all of us ensures that we will continue having forward steps and forward momentum in the weeks ahead. You know, wearing a face covering isn't an inconvenience. It's actually a statement. Wearing a face covering says, I love and I care for my neighbors. Wearing a face covering says, I have respect for workers on the front lines. A face covering says, we will beat this. And if people do this, if we keep these face coverings on, if we keep our distance and wash our hands, we will beat this virus and open many more businesses, go back to many more activities, and take many steps forward. This is up to all of us. and I'm confident we can meet the challenge. For those who have lost a loved one, it's a reminder of how serious this business is. These aren't inconveniences. Because of the lives lost, or the medical personnel, when I go to some of those 8 o'clock thank yous in front of hospitals, they say, tell everybody not to forget us. We still have cases coming in every day. We're still at great risk. Some of our people have gotten sick and even died. So tell people their behavior matters and their actions have an impact. With that, let me update you on the data that's come in this week and compare it to where we were last week. Today, we learned of 962 more positive COVID-19 cases in the county of Los Angeles, bringing our total to 36,259 cases. This is a 3% increase since yesterday. 1 week ago, on Friday, we had 883 new cases and a total of 30,296. A week ago, we marked 6,081 cases for the week. This week, 5,963 new cases. In the city, there were 395 cases today, and that brings our total in the city of LA to 17,432 cases, which is a 2% increase since yesterday. To compare with the week before, there were 310 cases and a total of 14,563. And the worst part of my night, and I know the news you don't want to hear, is that we had 47 new deaths confirmed in the last 24 hours countywide, bringing the total to 1,755, a 3% increase since yesterday. Comparing that to a week ago, last Friday, there were 51 deaths reported and 1,468 deaths total. This week was less deadly by a little than last week. That's good news. We added 287 total deaths. That's not good news for this week compared to 302 total deaths the week before, each one of those numbers representing untold sadness. But as I have said many times, COVID-19 is not a problem that we will resolve overnight. As much as we want the pace to quicken, COVID-19 demands our discipline. The number of cases since March has grown week over week. However, over the past few weeks, new cases have plateaued to about 800 to 1,000 new cases per day countywide. Similarly, the number of deaths has now stabilized at about 300 a week. But let's put those numbers in perspective. A lot of people said, oh, this is no more than the flu in terms of the deaths that we have. But to put these numbers in perspective, 125 Angelenos died from the flu in Los Angeles County last season, which was from August 2018 to August 2019. What that means is that more residents are dying from COVID-19 in a single week in Los Angeles County than die from flu in a single year. The stabilizing of a curve also means the pandemic is not growing out of control, and that's a good thing for all of us to hear. We're not seeing the data skyrocket as we did in previous weeks, and as time goes on, I want to thank you for helping manage this unprecedented challenge. And every time you take an action with a face covering or washing your hands or keeping your distance, you help us limit the spread of this virus. And those decisions make a big difference, and they actually save lives. It's not every day you get to save lives, but every day that's exactly what you have been doing and can continue to do as well. To everybody who has been spared the terrible pain of losing someone they love to COVID-19, and therefore thinks that this virus strikes only those who are elderly or vulnerable, to them I'd say, you're wrong. This virus takes the lives of people in the prime of their lives as well. People like Jory Bahanan, who died on March 30th. Jory was called Jay, and he was laid to rest 1 week shy of his 40th birthday. He was a kind and thoughtful Angeleno, a person who was always looking out for others. He was a huge sports fan who grew up here in LA, but he rooted hardest for Chicago teams because that's where he was born. And Jay was a great dad who taught his kids an important lesson to never be afraid of life. Never be afraid. He had an essential job that he loved, getting people to where they needed to go. After 14 years as a driver and bus operator at Metro, Jay had recently started working in Santa Clarita, and he always greeted passengers with a smile He chatted with them, made sure that they felt safe. He was taken way too soon, and he leaves behind so many people who miss him. Most of all, his parents, his 11-year-old daughter, Janelle, and stepson, Julian, who's 17. Let's hold them in our hearts now, and everybody who's lost someone. Let's send this family strength collectively, and all families who have lost someone. And let's move forward like Jay would have, without fear, unafraid, and with love. And let's keep doing our part for every Angelino by keeping them safe. And I offer my deepest condolences to every grieving family tonight. Making sure our hospitals stay below capacity and can handle any emergency surge, this is critical to our mission. And so across the county, our general emergency hospitals have today 1,077 beds available, 891 of them for acute care and 186 in ICU units, and an inventory of 1,243 available ventilators. We have a large testing infrastructure, as you know, that is leading the nation. Across the city and county test sites, last Friday we had the capacity to test about 20,000 people and had tested 250,000 to date. Today, by the end of today, we have the capacity of 21,000 a day, and we will have tested 350,000. It's an incredible increase in just 1 week. And remember, anybody can get tested, even if you don't feel safe. If you haven't done it, as always, I remind you, go to coronavirus.lacity.org/testing or call us at 213-978-1028 or just call 311 after 5 p.m. As Angelinos adapt to and adjust to our new reality, we're always trying to work to make your life a little bit easier and our communities more livable. And tonight I can announce the full launch of our Slow Streets program. This is an exciting moment for us to have a little bit more space in our neighborhoods to do what we're already doing: walking, taking a young baby out in a stroller, skating, biking. Temporarily, we will restrict traffic, that is the auto traffic, on certain neighborhood streets so that Angelinos can have that space to run, to walk, to bike. We're not fully closing any streets. We know that families still need to be able to drive to and from their homes, so emergency access will always be allowed. But we're going to redirect traffic on some of our local roads for stretches of about 2 miles so more of us can have some safety and an easier move through our neighborhood streets. We've already begun this program in 2 neighborhoods, Del Rey and Sawtell, where we've worked with Councilmember Mike Bonin, who has led on this issue, and thank you, Mike, for your leadership. He's also the chair of our Transportation Committee, and the Del Rey and West LA Sawtell neighborhood councils, who have been so integral in getting this off the ground. This first phase covers about 7 miles total in West LA streets, but it's just the start. Already a dozen full applications have been submitted in neighborhoods around Los Angeles, from the Valley to Northeast Los Angeles, South Los Angeles, and the West Side. So please, if you're interested in sponsoring in your neighborhood an initiative to do the same thing, go to coronavirus.lacity.org/slowstreets to learn more and to tell us where to next bring this program. Slow Streets are all about you. It's about your health, it's about your wellness, it's about enabling folks to get some exercise while you're remaining closer to home without having to go to a park or a trail or a beach. And it's also about equity. Not everybody lives right next to a park with hills. Not everybody's close to the beach. We should make sure that hard-hit communities and those that are more inland or in flatter areas have the same exercise capacity as other places as well. And Slow Streets is also about pedestrian safety, knowing you can safely walk someplace, because we've seen a recent uptick in the number of fatal traffic collisions on our roads. So we need drivers to continue to slow down. More people are walking. I know there's less traffic, so the temptation is to speed, but trust me, we're out there with officers, and we need you to continue to do the right thing. Slow Streets is also about physical distancing. This is about how we live with COVID-19, and we can have that space without infecting one another, even as more of the city opens up. And Slow Streets finally is about taking responsibility. It's about doing right by our neighbors and showing respect for everyone's health. So as we make these changes on some of our streets, we're also keeping a few of the previous changes in place. When I first issued the Safer at Home order, I announced changes in parking enforcement to make sure we weren't penalizing you because we were asking you to be home. We still were sweeping the streets, but we weren't going to ticket you simply because you couldn't move a car because you were staying home and you needed to be home. We stopped ticketing and towing abandoned and oversized vehicles, vehicles with expired registration, and for recently expired permit parking placards as well. Those parking enforcement changes were supposed to end today, but I'm pleased to announce that we're extending them to June 1st. We will regularly assess all the time what the conditions are, and we will never penalize you for having to stay at home and doing the right thing. So we'll keep looking at that, but as of today, those are extended. We're still enforcing parking across the city, but they're focused on prioritizing those main areas, health and safety that allow our emergency workers to get around, helping businesses that rely on pickup and delivery. It's like those new zones that we have for our restaurants and our retailers to make sure that they can safely get business to the curbside. And everything that we do, every action that we take, all of it is a reminder that this moment requires all of us to act together. As I've highlighted in so many of these briefings, our local government is joined by philanthropists, nonprofit activists, advocates, and everyday Angelenos who are stepping up to give back to all of us. That's what we've seen from the Giving Spirit, the remarkable organization that I always go to, and Tom Bergamame and everybody else who's a part of it, who have been just extraordinary leaders to help us combat homelessness here in Los Angeles. They've committed to serving 10,000 homeless lives in 60 days during this crisis by assembling and delivering health and safety kits with food and water, health and hygiene, a knapsack to store and carry personal belongings, and handmade cards that are filled with our LA love, the compassion and the message that we see you, you matter, and there is help for you. It's the same gratitude that we show our frontline COVID-19 workers, our essential first responders and nurses and doctors and medical professionals, hospital staff across the city, our firefighters and police officers and military personnel who are standing firm to save lives. And with our military and National Guard always here to support us, we've seen the Bob Hope USO leap into action, delivering hot meals to service members and law enforcement who are working long hours at the port, putting on virtual entertainment programs for military families, and producing and sending more than 1,500 face coverings to military members who are assigned to our city. That's the same spirit that we've seen from folks who've helped us stand up the Angeleno Card program. More than $20 million of donations to date that will help 60,000 Angelenos with the cash and the basic necessities that they need to get through this crisis. So far, we've already helped 27,000 Angelenos with 9,000 cards. Over $9 million has already been distributed, and we expect that pace to pick up in coming days. Please help us sustain that work and sustain our families and sustain our neighbors. Go to mayorsfundla.org/Angeleno to donate tonight. I read your texts, I answer your calls, and I listen to your questions asking those core things. When can I see other members of my family again? When will the gut-wrenching economic pain end? When will hope push horror out of the headlines? By fighting this virus together, by supporting our local businesses, by wearing our face coverings, by physically distancing, by washing our hands, by doing what is right, we will get through this together. I hope each week is a brighter one for us. And that's, again, as it's been from the beginning of this, not in my hands, but in yours. By the things that you do, the love that you show, the generosity that you share, the discipline that you have, there's a certainty that we've always been in this together. We may hate COVID-19, but it has taught us lessons about what's important in life, our families and our friends, the caring for one another. And so we have learned that we all can do more when we stay safe and we stay healthy. And whenever we can, we continue to stay at home. Thank you, Los Angeles, for your courage. Thank you for what you have done. And as always, I wish you much strength and much love. And with that, let me thank the press, and I'd be happy to answer any questions we have tonight. Thank you. First question, please.
We'll go to the line of Josh Haskell with ABC 7. Your line is open.
Hey, Josh.
Hey, Mayor, question about the order that will take effect in 1 week that requires the homeless living under freeway overpasses, underpasses, exit ramps to be relocated. Will you enforce this, and where will you house those relocated?
There is no such order. I know that Judge Carter is talking about focusing on that, but there's no order that folks need to be moved. I think we share a common concern, advocates, business community, Judge Carter, the county, other cities, and the city of Los Angeles about people who are experiencing homelessness. And one of the considerations that we should all be concerned about is people who live over or under a freeway overpass are exposed to unhealthier conditions on top of everything else they're exposed to on the street. But there is no such order coming. There is an ongoing discussion, negotiation, and new resources that thankfully, my plea of 2 years ago to have a FEMA-like response to build on measures H and HHH and get new emergency state funds and federal funds, that some of those things are finally coming to fruition, whether it's hotel and motel rooms, whether it's the testing that we're doing, new shelters we've stood up in our rec centers, or the work that we're doing to prioritize those areas. The judge has asked us to work with him to prioritize folks that are there, living under and over freeway overpasses, and we hope in the coming week that we can come to some common agreements with all the parties in the court case. Thank you. Next question, please.
Next, we'll open the line of Robert Kovacic with NBC. Your line is open.
Hey, Robert.
Mayor Garcetti, happy Friday, sir.
You too, Robert.
And we know what day this is, May 15th. Curious to know, as we've approached now what is no longer a deadline, but what many hoped would be, if you can assess where we are in terms of, did you think things would be better by now? Do you fear things would get progressively worse? And, you know, just sort of your overall assessment. And second question for you, and if we can start with this, that's fine as well. What is your take on the North County breakaway that we are seeing evidence of right now? The mayors of Lancaster, Santa Clarita, and Palmdale have told us that they're ready to move ahead with or without any further direction.
So I'll start there. Those are not my cities, and I have tremendous respect for all my brother and sister mayors and city council members throughout the city. I convene, I think, as you know, and have quarterly for the last 7 years, all 88 city mayors. So we have a common place. We had a phone call this week as well, and some mayors said, what do we do if we want to move more quickly? That's a question that is in the county's hands. I think it does get confusing when we have a patchwork of different things within a single county, let alone within a region. And we saw that. We saw that when Orange County was different than LA County. We try to merge those as much as possible, but I hope we can take those sorts of steps together. It's up to, you know, the county to lay down what the basic rules are that we cannot exceed. Of course, cities can go more slowly and may assess doing that. There may be times when there's places with more spread, but it's a common misconception that somehow this is only concentrated, for instance, in the urban core areas. Some of the more suburban areas have infection rates that are just as high as the county average. So again, that is more of a county question than one for me. And I respect that the governor has allowed counties, and maybe there's a mechanism to do that across cities as well, to go differently. But today that does exist. The county says this is the maximum you can do, but you certainly can do less if you want to. In terms of the assessment, sure, I, like you and everybody else, had hoped we'd be out of the woods, that there'd be a vaccine as quickly as possible, that we might be further, but I'm very proud of where this city and the county is right now. We certainly saved thousands, if not tens of thousands of deaths. The LA metro area is more densely populated than the New York metro area. And just look at the difference between the two places. Our heart goes out to New York area, which has suburban areas that were hit very hard. It's not just about density, as well as areas inside New York City. And I know what we have done has saved lives. Secondly, I'm really proud that last couple of weeks, we were able to take steps forward. We earned those steps. They are rooted in the science. They are supported by public health officials, and they show that there isn't going to be darkness every single day and every single week. And more light will continue to come in the more we adhere to these things and walk together. So whether it's the second question or the first, hopefully as often as possible, we can take those steps together, whether it's our private actions or whether it's our public permissions. And if we do that, I'm very optimistic that throughout the summer, we'll see more and more of that happening, with the caveat, you know, we never want to predict too far into the future. We have to share the information, assess that. When you take a step, you have to wait about 3 weeks to see the impact. But I'm optimistic that 3 weeks from now, we'll see this level holding. And if so, I'm going to be asking what comes next. Thanks, Robert. Next question, please.
Next, we'll open the line of Jim Roof with Westwood One News. Your line is open.
Hey, Jim.
Hello, Mayor. How are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I was wondering if there's some confusion. I think you cleared up the mask confusion because the county was saying you don't need to wear one if you're on a solo walk or a run. In fact, medical experts are saying don't wear a mask if you're running on a hot day because that's not healthy for you. So I think you cleared that up. I think common sense plays a big role in all of this too. So thank you very much for clearing that up. As I understand it, take it with you wherever you go. If you run into a group of people, put it on. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, if you're going to come into contact with anybody, exactly. If you're going to come into contact with everybody, have it on. Go ahead.
I'm curious too about the order for the beaches compared to the parks. When you go to parks, you see people gathering and sitting together. There may be families. I'm not saying people are violating any rules, but people can sit on the grass at a park, but not at a beach. And I don't understand the medical science difference between the two. It would be great if you could have some of the medical professionals who are advising you, maybe we can ask these questions to them, unless you can answer that question about parks and sitting in the grass and beaches and not being allowed to sit in the sand, please.
Yeah, I think that's a good question to direct to the county public health officials. As it's been explained to me, though, certainly it's that mad rush on a beautiful day where so many people show up that you no longer can physically distance yourself, and a beach is a constrained piece of real estate. The parks can be too, but many of them are bigger, less people. Not everybody rushes to the same park in the way that we all rush to the same beaches. So right now, I think maybe we can see that. I've seen some places around the world where they begin to open that up, where they're able to do that. You really just have to be able to regulate the number of people who come in. We're able to do that. For instance, Griffith Park, long before COVID-19, there's lots of times we have to shut down some of the access points or even admission into the parks when there's really crowded days. That's tougher to do on a beach because it's so spread out. And, I certainly don't want to see lines of police and sheriffs and a local law enforcement. That's not ever the role I imagine for them. We've got to get through this together, not with a police state, but with good behavior. So I don't have all those answers. I know that the county, though, has said this is what's allowed right now. I think let's take that for a couple weeks and see, and let's be creative. If we can come up with ways for folks to be able to safely stay there for a longer period of time, I'm all for it. Thank you. Next question.
Next, we'll open the line of Claudia Prosciutta with KNX News Radio. Your line is open.
Hi, Claudia.
Hey, as the weather is warming up, I'm getting questions from people about the possibility of pools reopening, and so I'm wondering if that's something you're considering at this point. And then also regarding the masks, I understand that there are not enough officers to enforce the mask requirement for 4 million people, but then shop owners and employees are stuck trying to get people to comply, and you end up with situations like the guard at Target in Van Nuys who suffered a broken arm during a confrontation. So is there something more that the city could do to try to, get people to comply without leaving the burden on those who work at the grocery stores and other places? Thank you.
Sure. We said when we put the mandatory face covering requirement in for grocery stores and pharmacies that any business could refuse service if somebody wasn't wearing that because that doesn't meet the law. Like other laws where people can refuse service, of course we can't have a police officer in every single store, but law enforcement is always available for confrontations like that or for somebody who refuses to abide by what the law is right now. So I'd encourage shop owners to know that, businesses to take advantage of that the way they would pre-COVID-19 for anybody else who is breaking the law in their areas. Second, I've talked to Chief Moore, and one of the things I think we can do, and our park rangers and city employees can do, in areas where we have people out, whether it's parks, maybe the beach, other places, is I'd love to, and we're looking at whether we can find some non-surgical grade masks that are disposable or quick use, is to say, hey, educate, then encourage, and give them a mask. I think that's a best practice. We're not going to be able to do it everywhere, every time, but it's a great way to be able to do that. Same thing with businesses, where they can stock up, and if we have excess PPE, we'll certainly open that up at cost for LA businesses to be able to acquire, where they can say, hey, somebody comes in, you're supposed to be wearing that, or it's actually required. Here's a mask, can you please wear that? If anybody ever runs in trouble, call us. LAPD is available for this and any other law that is broken, but that's critically important. The pools themselves, I think most health experts say are not dangerous, but we know pools get crowded, so it's the proximity in pools. It's not that the virus lives where there is chlorinated pools. So I think, as I've seen it, that was quite late in both the guidance from CDC, the state, and at the county level. So I hate to always sometimes be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think that is right around the corner. And of course, it's also the areas around the pools that are tighter. People are close by, and it's very difficult to physically distance. If you go to a pool, typically in the summertime that LA City runs, people are nowhere close to 6 feet apart from each other. So I think it'll probably be some time with pools. Thank you. Next question.
And next, we'll open the line of Dakota Smith with LA Times. Your line is open.
Hi, Dakota.
Good evening, Mayor. In the last 24 hours, 4 council members and City Controller Ron Galperin have called on Councilman Jose Huizar to resign. Also, City Council President Nuri Martinez has asked Jose to stop participating in council meetings. Huizar has not been charged with any crimes, as we all know. And some of his constituents tell us that they don't want him to resign. They like him. I also asked Mike here what he thought, and he said any elected official who has been indicted should step down. But of course, Huizar hasn't been indicted. Do you think Huizar should stop participating in meetings as Martinez has asked him to do? Do you think he should resign as these other council members want him to, or do you think he should remain in office? Thank you.
Well, first of all, let me be clear. We cannot tolerate the kind of behavior that's come to light in recent weeks. It is absolutely unacceptable. As we know, you can have 40,000 employees, you can have dozens of elected officials. All it takes is 1, 2, a handful of people. We saw this during the Rampart scandal with LAPD when we had amazing officers doing their jobs, but those who weren't and who broke the law polluted the entire pool for everybody. We cannot accept that sort of behavior. Second, we can't let this dark cloud continue to hang over us. So I support what Council President Martinez said, but I believe that Councilmember Huizar should limit his interactions. And if he is indeed charged, he should step aside immediately. I think that is in the public interest. I think it is in community interest. And to any constituent, should that happen, of a district, we have a procedure here in Los Angeles where our chief legislative analyst becomes the acting council member to make sure no group of 250,000 people in a council district are not represented, do not get their fair share, do not have city services, et cetera. So I want to reassure people of that. That happens when somebody leaves early, has to resign, or in cases like this. But I support what Council President Martinez said about making sure that he should step aside for the remainder of this investigation, and if he is charged, he should resign immediately. Thank you. Next question.
Our last questions for the night will be in Spanish. The first one coming from Victor Cordero from Australia TV. Your line is open.
Hi, Victor. Buenas tardes.
Mayor, ¿qué tal? Alcalde, perdón, muy buenas tardes. Le voy a hacer la pregunta en inglés y después la hago en español. Mayor, number one, what is the next steps to follow in the 5 phases plan going towards phase 3 when it comes to small businesses? I talked to a number of small owners, and they are eager to open. They need to not only to sustain themselves, but also sustain their employees' families. ¿Cuáles son los pasos a seguir, alcalde, para los próximos pasos en la etapa 3, en este plan de 5 etapas para los dueños de pequeños negocios que ya quieren abrir? Y sobre todo le pregunto en español, yo no sé si usted ve la tele, mi canal, pero yo lo veo a usted todos los días, y usted y yo necesitamos un corte de pelo. Sí. Hay que abrir los salones de belleza.
Gracias, Victor. I'll answer that first in English and then in Spanish, and as always, then I'll give my evening address in Spanish, and let me pre-thank everybody who is tuned in and who always, whether it's through one of our local channels and Channel 35, who I always want to thank for their great work, as well as through Facebook and our social media. So the next, there are stages, or phases some people call them, but they're stages, and each stage has steps in them. So we're in the beginning of phase 2. Within that phase or stage, there are steps. Like last week, we moved forward with curbside and doorside business for some businesses. Now it's all businesses. We opened up parks. This week it was beaches. And the county has laid out many of what those next steps could be. For businesses specifically, I think that within stage 2, under the state regulations, businesses can begin to open their doors, but I think at a maximum of 25% capacity. And we'd have to see some stronger numbers, I think, for, I don't want to speak for the county, but for the county to move forward with that, in the next day or two or anytime soon. But we have committed to every few weeks looking at this collectively. The county, I know, will look at that in the coming weeks to see whether that is something possible for us to do. There are a lot of other small businesses, for instance, hair salons, barbers, that will probably take a little bit longer. That's in stage 3. Some offices that are essential can be opened right now. Childcare has always been available to be open. That's a small business for a lot of people. So these are still in phase 2. The next set of steps would include, I think, the opening of some of the stores to physical customers. En español, hay etapas y también hay pasos. Hay muchos pasos en cada etapa. Estamos en etapa 2 y la comienza de etapa 2. Ahora